Добрый вечер, уважаемые телезрители. Как всегда, на Медиаинформе программа «Мы с Михайлом Кациним». Но сегодня у меня в гостях будет не политик, не экономист, не финансист и даже не общественный деятель и не спортсмен. У меня в гостях американский писатель Джош Баркан, которого я анонсировал еще на прошлой неделе, и вот сегодня в эфире он у меня. Mr. Barkan, hello.
Hello.
First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to you that you agreed to participate in our evening show, and it's a great pleasure for us and a great honor to host you here. Thank you very much, Mr. Barkan.
Thank you for having me.
Ну, уважаемые телезрители, интервью будет на английском языке, но я буду по ходу пьесы его переводить. Это еще раз нас всех мотивирует к тому, что мы должны учить иностранные языки. Mr. Barkan, actually I gave a special title to this program, and in Russian, if we translate this title from Russian to English, it means the role of the writer in the changing world. So, and this will be my first question. What is the role of the writer in the changing world? Because if we will trace the history to the medieval age and later, always the writer was the person who reflected the reality and who actually helped to develop the society. So, which role for the writer do you foresee in the current circumstances?
Yeah, I think in some ways the role of the writer has really remained the same, which is to reflect the reality that is around us. And that reality is often full of problems, often full of conflicts, as you know. And so the function of the writer is to honestly portray the problems that are in front of us. Some people in the contemporary period have wanted to focus just on aesthetics, or have wanted to focus just on problems found, for example, in the more personal area of the family. And so in the United States, at least, in the contemporary period, the focus of American writers has been on these personal problems, very much within, if you look at writing after World War II. But I think it's a mistake if we only focus on this interior world, this world just of the family. We also need to consider in the contemporary period the political and social problems that are around us. This doesn't mean writing as a means of, say, propaganda, or writing in a sense that is not very, too ideological, but it does mean writing in a way that portrays those significant problems.
Thank you, Mr. Barkan. I will translate for our Ukrainian-speaking, Russian-speaking audience. Я задал вопрос мистеру Баркану, какова роль писателя в современном меняющемся мире. И мистер Баркан ответил, что роль писателя, она по-прежнему очень актуальна, ибо писатель рефлексирует то, что происходит снаружи, в окружающем его мире, и то, что происходит внутри, в его семье, в неком социуме, который его окружает. Ну, конечно же, вот тот тренд, который был популярен после Второй мировой войны, когда писатели сосредотачивались больше на семейных историях, на как бы восприятие окружающего мира через семью, он постепенно меняется, и писатели, они все больше и больше погружаются в осмысление окружающей нас действительности. И в этом смысле, конечно же, писательский труд, он очень важен. Mr. Barkan, we have a common friend, Aaron Charpentier, who is your junior colleague. Yeah, he's also pursuing his, let's say, writing career. And I was actually very happy that he introduced me to you. And my question will be about the authorship in the, let's say, modern world. Is it possible, let's say now, when you have an opportunity to publish your articles, publish your novels in the internet, in your blogs, let's say, sell it through Amazon, through different sources, is still the writers depend upon the publishing houses as they used to depend, let's say, 50, 100 years ago?
Yeah, I think it has changed for writers who are less well known. So writers who are well known are still very rooted in the main publishing industry with the main publishing houses. And that's because those publishing houses can publicize their work and allow for those books to be distributed. But writers who are seeking to be new writers are often finding the alternative ways that you mentioned, the ways through, say, self-publishing or publishing on the internet. I could make a longer answer, but you're having to translate, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Я спросил господина Баркана о возможностях публиковать свои труды у современного писателя. Ведь не секрет, что 50-100 лет назад писатели очень сильно зависели от издательств. И сохраняется ли такая зависимость по сей день? Мистер Баркан ответил, что, конечно, писателю с более известным именем легче публиковать свои труды, но писатели, амбициозные молодые писатели, которые только ступают на писательскую тропу, они могут найти себя и показать себя миру через разные источники распространения информации. И в этом смысле, конечно, не обязательно обращаться к издательствам. Mr. Barkan, my next question will be about the censorship. During the last 20-25 years, many things changed in this world. And actually, there was a trend to democracy, and even the American scientist Francis Fukuyama, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, he suggested that now we actually face the end of the history, because finally democracy system took place in, let's say, the whole world. But in reality, after 25 years, we see that even Soviet Union collapsed, we still have the problems with democracy in different parts of the world. And partially, we have still the censorship, but this censorship is not actually imposed by the state governments. This censorship is imposed by the authors themselves or by the professors in the universities when they don't want to talk about things because they are afraid of the social, let's say, consequences, and they're afraid of being accused of, let's say, misinterpretation or, let's say, in the wrong ideas. So what do you think? Is the censorship and self-censorship takes place among American authors when they avoid to talk about the topics which can, let's say, provoke the social disturbance?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, and I do agree with you that there is quite a bit of self-censorship now taking place by authors. There was recently a very important letter that was published in Harper's Magazine that was written by many well-known people on the left, actually, people like Noam Chomsky, but also a variety of African Americans who are, say, actors, who are dancers, and also writers. And the concern that some of these people had, also someone like Steven Pinker, who has been controversial, the concern that these people had is that there is, as you say, an incipient self-censorship taking place in which, because of the controversy of certain themes, particularly having to do often with race, but with other subjects as well, there is some form of self-censorship taking place. At the same time, I don't think we can say that there is no state censorship or state encouragement of censorship also taking place. When Trump actively calls the press the enemy of the state, and when he regularly prevents certain journalists from taking place in White House press conferences, that is a form of censorship as well. So we have two forms of censorship taking place simultaneously in the United States and in the West, but particularly in the United States at this time.
Я задал вопрос мистеру Баркану, насколько самоцензура распространена среди писателей, опять же, беря во внимание, что есть темы на Западе, которые публичные люди, обладающие искусством пера и искусством владения пером, тщательно обходят. Так можно найти вот подобных людей и в профессуре ведущих университетов, и среди писателей. Так вот, есть темы, которые не подпадают под мейнстримовые идеи, и люди, пишущие, стараются обходить эти темы. Мистер Баркан со мной согласился. Более того, он рассказал, что недавно в Harper журнале была опубликована совместная статья о ведущих мыслителей, среди которых был тот же Наум Хомский, в которой как раз и говорилось о самоцензуре, которая постепенно получает распространение на Западе. В то же время мистер Баркан отмечает, что в Соединенных Штатах Америки есть сейчас две формы самоцензуры. Ну, преимущественно Соединенных Штатов Америки, хотя можно говорить и в целом о западном мире. Первая самоцензура — это первая цензура, да, это самоцензура, которая лично не дает пишущим людям выражать свои мысли так, как они хотят. И с другой стороны, безусловно, когда мистер Трамп выходит на пресс-конференцию и хейтит прессу и высказывается в негативном ключе о прессе, это, безусловно, также является проявлением цензуры. Мистер Баркан.
Yes.
Mr. Barkan, I would like to ask you about the politics. And the politics actually is very important nowadays because politicians, as actually they used to do, they continue to shape the world. Do you think that nowadays politicians are less intelligent than they used to be? That's why we have many problems which now the world face.
Yeah, I don't think that the fundamental problem is that we have less intelligent politicians as the leader of the problem. The origin of the problem is a more ignorant population. So we are choosing more ignorant politicians to lead us because the population is less educated. So in the United States, this process of reducing the education really began about 40 years ago, I would say, in the Reagan administration, when there was quite a bit of cutting of funding for the education programs. And you also have a kind of strategy of also playing upon the ignorance and fears of people, a strategy that began in the 1960s, particularly with what we call the Southern strategy. That was the strategy Nixon employed to kind of play on feelings of racism and other kind of more basic instinctual fears and ignorance that people have. So the combination of these two things, political advisors who are intentionally exploiting the ignorance of the population and a reduction in support for education, is causing then people to choose political leaders who are less intelligent.
Я задал вопрос мистеру Баркану. Считает ли он, или согласен ли он с той точки зрения, что сейчас нами правят менее образованные, менее интеллигентные политики, чем когда-то, и, естественно, в силу своей низкой образованности они зачастую принимают не совсем правильные решения. Мистер Баркан сделал акцент немного на другом. Он говорит о том, что сейчас сама публика, само общество, оно менее образовано, чем когда-то было, да, вот в своей какой-то средней константе. Естественно, что менее образованное общество выбирает менее образованных политиков и соглашается с той политикой, которую они, собственно, проводят. И здесь вот очень важно понимать, что как раз мы получаем некий такой продукт в виде политиков как раз благодаря вот такому низкому запросу со стороны общества. Мистер Баркан.
Yes.
You know, you just mentioned about less educated society who actually choose less intelligent, less educated politicians as it used to be. If we are talking about society and the tastes of society, do you think that the modern society can digest let's say, the deep literature, the literature which reflect different stages of emotions, different, let's say, different emotional levels? Do you think that modern readers are ready to read a good quality literature?
Yes, well, we will always have some readers, of course, who are looking for that kind of material. But as the writer Philip Roth noted, we have fewer and fewer of those kinds of readers. So at one point, Roth said already 20 years or so ago that he felt that there were only 100,000 serious readers left in the United States. And he was reflecting upon the kind of people who were still reading kind of work. These are people who read, you know, all the time, regularly, and have that kind of sophistication, as you say, to recognize subtext and the full complexity of a text. So there will always be some of those readers. But as you know, because of the extra time that people are spending now on social media, because of the focus on the internet, and the fact that many of us spend much of our time, even readers, on the internet predominantly, we're losing this kind of deep reading, what we call deep reading. It's something that is in decline, but I think it's stabilized at this point.
Thank you. Я спросил мистера Баркана о читателях. Считает ли он, что современные читатели не готовы воспринимать серьезную литературу, которая заставляет думать? Мистер Баркан со мной согласился, действительно, количество читателей, способных и желающих поглощать действительно глубокую, рефлексирующую литературу, существенно меньше, чем когда-то было. И отчасти это связано с распространением социальных сетей, медиа. Мы отучились глубоко и вдумчиво читать. Да, мир стал достаточно быстрым, и у нас просто не хватает терпения на глубокое чтение. Но ситуация постепенно корректируется, по мнению мистера Баркана. Мистер Баркан, we now face the serious crisis with the coronavirus, and it has both medical and social implications. We won't discuss medical implications because I think let's say we are not enough qualified to discuss medical angles of the problem, but I think that we have to emphasize the social angles or social angle of the problem. How do you think the relations between people will change and are changing in the context of coronavirus crisis, social distance, etc.? Because I'm sorry, I will clarify my point. You know, now the most popular programs in Ukraine and I think in the United States are Zoom, Skype, so programs which allow to communicate, let's say, remotely. So what do you think? Let's look at the bad side of the coin. Will this situation affect the human relations, human emotions?
Well, it already has, of course, affected, because I think all of us do feel to a greatest extent more isolation in the moment. So it's not a question of whether it will. What we see are contradictory or different trends. Some are bringing us together more. People are recognizing their greater connection to family, their greater connection to friends, and the desire to have that. At the same time, what we're seeing is really a kind of cocoon effect in which people are being forced to limit, you know, the number of people that they will have contact with. In terms of literature, it's been in some ways a plus. People are reading much more as they're isolated, and also we see people looking at bookstores via Zoom quite a bit, so you're getting large audiences for readings. So I think that's one set of what's happening. Very briefly, the other big effect, of course, is going to be economic, and in terms of the polarization of economic disparity, because the people who must go to work are not only more vulnerable, but these are the ones who are dying more in the United States, at least. And those who have more money are being much safer in the United States. And so money, in a sense, is buying safety, and that has social impacts after this that are going to last. We also see it with who's losing jobs and who's gaining via the stock market. So these are different kinds of social impacts that are taking place.
Thank you, Mr. Barkan. Я задал вопрос мистеру Баркану о последствиях коронавируса. Причем, конечно, мы не можем с мистером Барканом обсуждать медицинские последствия коронавируса, поскольку мы недостаточно квалифицированы, чтобы это сделать, но мы можем говорить о социальных последствиях. И, конечно, я упомянул мистеру Баркану, что сейчас в Украине, так же, как, наверное, в Соединенных Штатах Америки, наиболее популярными программами являются Zoom, Skype, которые обеспечивают как раз дистанционную коммуникацию между людьми. Естественно, люди теряют вот эту эмоциональную основу общения, когда люди находятся друг возле друга, напротив друг друга и могут обмениваться не только мыслями, да, но и эмоциями. И мистер Баркан со мной согласился, действительно это происходит, действительно социальная дистанция между людьми значительно увеличилась. С другой стороны, люди стали больше читать. И, конечно, сейчас, если мы говорим о последствиях коронавируса, это, конечно же, социальная поляризация. Те люди, которые вынуждены идти на работу, они идут на работу, они подвержены возможности заражения коронавирусом, и, конечно, они наиболее уязвимы к этой болезни. И, естественно, нельзя не сказать о, в принципе, росте безработицы, опять же, в связи со свертыванием экономических процессов на фоне коронавируса, которое также влияет на положение наименее защищенных слоев населения. Таким образом, мы видим вот увеличивающуюся поляризацию между богатыми и бедными. Mr. Barkan, we don't have much time left, but I would like to ask you last question. What do you think is still the Western world, let's say, produce the global trends which can be accepted by other states? Yeah, just to clarify my point, during the 20th century, the Western world produced technologies, ideas, ideologies, many things which were later accepted by less developed states. Do you think that still Western world can, let's say, be an active player in this field?
Yes, I think that the West is going to continue to be the dominant force in terms of what many countries will be aspiring to. And I say this because the opposite primary force, of course, is China and what is taking place in certain parts of Asia. While China is clearly a strong economic power and will continue to be strong, it does not offer the kind of aspirational democratic hopes that I think, despite the shift towards authoritarianism that we've had temporarily, is the long-term trajectory. So I don't think China really offers that long-term trajectory of what most people are looking for, even as they look for some order. The West not only has that kind of a democratic foundation, even as it's being very tested now in places, whether it's Hungary, Poland, the United States, et cetera, we know that. But I think the long-term trajectory will be towards democracy. And I think in terms of popular culture, we haven't seen a diminishment at all of, say, the popularity of kind of music coming out of the United States, et cetera. So at a cultural level, there really isn't any diminishment. The real question is politically what will happen.
Я задал вопрос мистеру Баркану о возможности для западного мира продолжить свое влияние на менее развитые страны. Не секрет, что на протяжении 20 века западный мир и Соединенные Штаты Америки проджектировали на остальной мир идеи, тренды, технологии. И, конечно, третьи страны, если мы говорим третьи страны с точки зрения их развития, да, они воспринимали вот все то, что проджектировал западный мир. Мистер Баркан, заметив, что, конечно, сейчас в целом западный мир находится в кризисе, но по-прежнему западный мир может проджектировать демократию, идеи либерализма, даже несмотря на те проблемы, которые есть в отдельных восточноевропейских государствах, таких как Польша и Венгрия. По-прежнему западный мир может проджектировать идеи либерализма, успеха, демократии и этим самым отличаться от Китая. И это как бы этот запрос некий общественный, который есть к порядку, да, к установлению порядка за счет демократических ценностей, все-таки он не будет удовлетворен, и идея примат либерализма и демократии будет как присутствовать на западном мире, так и проджектироваться на менее развитые страны во всех других частях света. Mr. Barkan, thank you very much for this conversation, and I would like to ask you a favor and to agree to give us another interviews, because you're a very interesting person, and I'm sure that for Ukrainian audience will be very interesting to know you better and to listen to the interviews that you give. And also I will be very happy to see you here in Ukraine, because Ukraine is a very hospitable country with very nice people, and I'm sure that you will find much inspiration for your future writings here in Ukraine.
The truth is, I've always wanted to go to the Ukraine, so someday I hope that will be possible, and absolutely I'd be glad to speak with you anytime you'd like.
Я попросил Джоша Баркмана дать обещание продолжить наше интервью. Джош Баркан согласился и, конечно, пригласил нашего уважаемого гостя посетить Украину. И, как выяснилось, Джош Баркан уже давно хочет посетить нашу страну, так что я думаю, что скоро мы увидимся с нашим гостем здесь, в студии Медиаинформа. Спасибо, что были с нами. Оставайтесь всегда на Медиаинформе. Здесь вы услышите, увидите только самую интересную, самую объективную информацию от лучших из лучших гостей. Спасибо.